try different. Try again. If what you're doing isn't working, don't just try harder. Try something different.
We are back with the OpenEd podcast, my favorite kind of episode, Q&A episode. Matt, how you doing?
Doing great, Isaac. How about you?
Great. We had so much fun on that last one, and I'm excited to jump in today.
Yeah, we're getting great questions from parents, aren't we?
It's just I love it. I love getting these questions, and we get questions, we get stories. So keep those coming. By the way, you can email us market@opened.co. You can go subscribe to the OpenEd Daily as well. We're always soliciting questions. We're going to jump in. The first question, I've got a surprise secret weapon that we're going to have help us with an answer. So let me kick this off. First question, my homeschool question right now is how to help my son with ADHD keep on track during his school day. I don't just want to body double and be his task manager. I want to learn how to gradually, little by little, teach him skills to manage ADHD himself by the time he's an adult. Before I get to our secret weapon, I did solicit our team, and we got two great answers. Macy from our team says, my daughter with ADHD is learning some tools through counseling like checklists, small rewards, go pet the dog after 10 minutes of math, timers, personal goal, planner, phone alarms, etc. It has to be her idea and her follow through, and then we check in. Location also matters. She needs a darker room, no distraction, and the rewards after a certain time. Haley from our team said she agrees, and her son has ADHD. She has a visual schedule for him and a visual timer for longer tasks, frequent breaks. He always has a choice on where he wants to work. Time of day also matters. And she said she finds getting most of our work done before lunch is best for him. So I thought those were some great quick answers, but I want to really get into it with Andrea Fife from our team, who's been on the podcast before, who is really passionate about this subject, learners with ADHD. So Andrea, how would you answer this parent's question?
Yeah, it was a great question. And I love the way that the parent phrased it. They kind of started with, I already know some strategies that work for my child. I don't want to be the one that always has to be there to make sure the strategies are implemented. And I think that's so great. So first of all, hats off to the parent who's there doing the work and who's figuring this out. But that my take on this question is to kind of back it up for a second and to recognize the strategies that help with ADHD. If they work, they work. And they're pretty likely to always work. Just like a person who wears glasses, if they get up, they need glasses to see. So they put on their glasses and the glasses do what they do pretty much every day. You take away the glasses, you take away that successful strategy. So just thinking about the tips and tricks that help for ADHD and recognizing they may need to be permanent in some cases is a good way to think about it. But that doesn't mean it always has to be mom and dad's responsibility. Transitioning that responsibility to the child is absolutely possible as they get older. But again, I want to take a step back and just think about ADHD, some of its root causes, and think about the fact that a lot of experts will agree that with ADHD, there's actually a delay in executive functioning development. Simply stated, this is a person's ability to point the finger this way. People with ADHD are actually pretty good at pointing it this way and managing other people's functions. But to turn it to themselves and to be able to apply those functions to themselves is really challenging. The math I like to use is just simple math, 2/3. 2/3 of their current actual age is going to be an approximate executive function age. So I am the proud owner of a couple of ADHD kids at my house. My 17-year-old, I have to remind myself he's walking around with an executive function age of about a 12-year-old. I used to teach 5th grade, so that's easy for me to think like heading into 6th grade, heading into middle school. That's about where his executive function age is. My 15-year-old, he's walking around with the executive function age of about a 10-year-old. So it doesn't mean that he can't, they're both honestly geniuses, academic success off the charts, but that has nothing to do with executive function and the ability to manage yourself, manage your time, manage your tasks. They're totally separate. And I want to mention here, this actually doesn't go away as you get older. It actually gets worse because if we're applying a 2/3 formula, the deficit for a 6-year-old is only about a 2-year gap. the deficit for my 17-year-old, we're talking nearly a 6-year gap. And it's important to note that executive function continues to develop until about 25 or 30 years old, and then it stops. That's in all brains. So for an ADHD brain, like mine, that means that I topped out somewhere around the executive function age of probably 19 years old. So I can successfully do, without accommodation, anything that you would expect early in college person to be able to do. But if I want to succeed to a higher degree than a typical early college student, I need tips and tricks that I implement regularly. Just like I also wear contacts. I need to wear them every day or I don't see well. I also need the tips and tricks that help me with ADHD every day if I want to succeed at a level that is similar to my more neurotypical development. So that big, long backstory there, because
This
it's
is
really
like
important.
a master class. This is amazing.
I'm going to breathe here for a second. I often forget to do that when you get me talking about my passion, which this absolutely is. So going back kind of to the original question, which I'm going to paraphrase as, how can I prepare my child to handle their own accommodations? My advice is this: teach the strategies. Model out loud whatever it is that you're doing that you figured out helps. Talk about it out loud. Let them hear what you're doing, and then explicitly teach the steps, just like you would teach math strategies or you would teach, whatever your reading strategies are. There would be some explicit instruction there and transfer of information. Do the same thing here. Teach it explicitly. If body doubling works, help them identify peers that they can body double with. If checklists help, teach them how to make one. So that's how you start to transfer that skill set, is you say, look, checklists work every day, but I do not want to follow my child around well into their 40s, making their checklists for them. If I want to see them have successful skills that are going to empower them as an adult, because they're going to need them, then I'm going to teach them how to make their own checklist. If your ADHD or struggles with overwhelm and you're constantly breaking things down into smaller bite-sized pieces, teach that strategy. Or even better, if you can find technology that helps with that, find that and empower your child with the technology that helps. We use tons of technology tools in our house so that I can say, okay, I figured out what works, but I don't want to be the one running that every day. Let's turn that over to a technology tool that can take my place until my child is ready to do that on their own. If rewards helps, and that is so common that rewards helps, talk to your child about what kinds of rewards help and teach them how to celebrate their own successes. Really, really important here to recognize that for a person with an ADHD brain, that is always going to need to be an external reward. Many people have this idea that if I do an external reward for a while, it will eventually become intrinsic, and we can just move that over to, oh, but they'll feel so good when they accomplish that. If that was possible, those of us with ADHD would not have half the struggles that we have, if that's the way that it worked. But that's impacted by the executive function. We don't have that internal reward system. It doesn't work very well. So external stickers, prizes, literally help me as an adult. And if it works with your household values, the more often you can eat your rewards, the better. An M&M at the end of a challenging task doesn't need to be the full bag, but a small reward for a small accomplishment. And if you can transfer that skill to your child to say, hey, it seems like this is going to be a challenging task. Can you break it down into steps? Great work. What do you think is going to work as a reward when you've reached each of those benchmarks? Fantastic. Can you go to the pantry and go ahead and grab those? We already have those snacks that we bought in advance in case a hard task came. How many do you think that you should get when you have reached that benchmark? And just guiding them through that process out loud. Eventually, you'll see they'll start to do it for themselves. They'll sit down to do a hard thing. All of a sudden, they're up and you're like, where did you go? Why are you not doing the thing? And they're like, oh, I needed to go grab stickers and a sticky notepad because I want to break this down into chunks, and then I want to reward myself when I've reached the benchmarks. And you'll just be like, we did it. I think we arrived. I think we did it. And today they leveled up. So teach it. That's how you do it. You teach it. But in order to teach it, you have to know how to do it yourself first. So there's definitely a step, and nobody's going to be better at it than the person who's right there in the environment with that ADHD brain. What I've found, honestly, is, I coach the other adults that work with my kids, including their pediatrician, including teachers in any, academic settings they're in. I'm the one who's in the best position to be able to help my child write their user manual for their brain. We talk about all the time in our house. Let's write the user manual. But if I do a good job of that, then I should be able to use the user manual and train my child on their own brain. But first, I have to write the user manual.
I love it. What an amazing answer. I feel like I have learned so many things I didn't know or had never thought of before. I'm curious, you mentioned the technology tools. Have you ever tried, or your kids ever tried, using a chat GPT or something and saying, hey, can you take this complex task and break it into really small tasks for me or for someone with ADHD?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. The emergence of AI is huge for people with ADHD. You can go straight to the source with a tool like ChatGPT, or there's some really great apps that are actually, there's a lot of great housework apps. Most people with ADHD struggle with chores, and there's a lot of ones that are actually designed to break your chores down into manageable steps. There's even like a body doubling chore app out there where you can follow along either. Anyhow, you can pick which path, the more chaotic version or the more straightforward version. The emergence of technology tools to support ADHD brains is huge. There is so much available, and it is so helpful.
I love it. Thank you so much, Andrea, for coming on and taking that question on. I read that and I was like, I don't have experience with this. I don't really know what to say. I don't know if Matt does. I know somebody on our team who's really passionate. So appreciate you coming on and helping us.
Anytime.
Hey, before you drop, Andrea, I'd love, when I was a teacher, one of the things that helped students in my classroom that struggled with ADHD was getting exhausted at recess, right? So talk to me, share a little bit around the role of just exercise, activity, and really, there's many research articles that say boys in particular just need to get exhausted before their brain is in a state ready to learn something. How does that tie with ADHD category?
Yeah, that's a super interesting way to describe it. I think that the effect is the same, but I think I would describe it a little bit differently. The importance of recess is so huge. Getting outside, doing all those things. But I would say that one of the main reasons why that helps. So I talked about the executive function. The other major thing at play for most ADHD brains is a lack of dopamine. We have really, really irregular dopamine levels. And dopamine is required for focus. It's just required. You have to have it or you can't attend to the task. And people with ADHD really struggle to maintain that dopamine. Going outside, running around, being excited about something, just getting to do that is one of the quickest, most recommended, safest ways to increase dopamine. So I think a lot of people might observe that and think they needed to be worn out. And I would actually say it's the opposite. They needed to be excited. They needed to be engaged. They don't have to be engaged in what you need them to do. They just need to be engaged. You just need to flood the brain with dopamine. And when it's there, then the ADHD brain is practically unstoppable. Now, that's the flip side of that. If you've ever known somebody with ADHD, you've probably observed hyperfocus, which is they are so in the zone that to get them to do anything else is next to impossible. And so it's a regulation issue on both sides of the coin. And people with ADHD can't always control where they direct their focus. But getting those dopamine levels up in our house, and it's different for every person. So you have to kind of talk to that person and figure out what works. But for my 17-year-old, if he climbs something, he's like good to go. So super boring task that he needs to do, like we need to fill out a job application or something, and it's just grueling. We'll take the Chromebook on the roof. Literally, we take boring work on the roof at our house. So just increase the dopamine, and all of a sudden the work can get the tasks.
That is amazing. Yeah, this one looks kind of boring. We better take this to the roof. That's great. I love that.
Thanks, Andrea.
So I'll leave you with one parting thought. One of my favorites, ADHD YouTuber, Jessica McCabe of How to ADHD. She's got this cute little song I love. It says, try different, try again. And so That would be my parting thought. When you're working with your children on these skills, you might feel like you want to say, I need you to try harder. I need you to try harder if you just try harder. But I love the phrase, try different, try again. If what you're doing isn't working, don't just try harder, try something different, whether that's climbing the roof or something maybe a little bit less extreme. Whatever it is, whatever challenge you're facing, just try something different. There's a good chance that simply different is going to engage the dopamine and you're going to be good to go.
Wow. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me. Great to see you both.
Thanks, Andrea.
See ya.
I almost feel like we need like ADHD corner with Andrea or something. That was amazing.
Sure.
Got more than I bargained for. It's funny, Matt, she mentioned, and this relates to a little bit similar to a couple of the questions we've gotten when she was mentioning household chores, that's something people with ADHD often struggle with, and using some of these apps and things to do household chores. It reminded me, because we've had some parents ask, okay, if I'm trying to teach my kids or have my kids do stuff or learn stuff, how do I know it's the right stuff? And growing up homeschooled, my mom was not very good at being on point with various subjects, curricula. It was like we would, she would go to a book fair and buy tons and tons of books, but then we would never stick with them. And she always felt bad about that. But one thing she was always on point with was household chores. All of us kids always had household chores, a lot of them from a very early age, and we always had to get those done. There was no negotiation there. We could find ways to sort of like trick my mom into getting out of our homework sometimes, or clever ways of convincing her that, what we wanted to do was, as I got older, and especially when I went to a high school and then I went to college, I realized that the household chores were so valuable for my academic stuff. I went to a typical high school my sophomore year, and I found so many kids struggle to keep up with homework, and I never did. I would often have it done before I even left school for the day. I'd be doing it like during the other classes, which maybe wasn't a good idea, but because the transferability of like task management, just the ability to get things done on a schedule, to break them down. Okay, it's every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. My duties are laundry and sweeping the floor or whatever, and checking those off and having that. And so I think it's underestimated the transferability of just task completion. And household chores are a great thing if you have your kids at home, because they help you with the house, keep it clean. It's beneficial to everyone. But it is transferring to the kids just the ability to get things done. And once they can do that, they can point that at anything and apply that to anything.
No, I totally agree. As we raised our 5 children, we had lots of chore charts all over the place, and they laugh about it. We have fun memories of the chore charts and things that they did or didn't do, or told us it was done, and they tell us later it wasn't done. But even like Jordan Peterson, a brilliant behavioral psychologist, talks about the importance of wake up, make your bed. Like that impacts your entire life, just doing a task like that. So I think, we've learned as parents and we've seen the value of some of those just household chores. You're contributing to this community called family, to the household we live in, and you can see instant success and feel like you've been productive for a moment. And those are things that are needed to set the stage for more challenging activities in your day.
Yeah, 100%. I know a lot of parents get really stuck in like the grades. I want my kid to get good grades and be taking, whatever honors classes and the academic success. And so that's all that they focus on. And I think the stress that comes with that, for one, is really high. But two, a lot of the things you're hoping your kids can learn actually can be learned at a base level with just simpler things like household chores. So, because as they go on in life, that AP biology class in high school is probably not going to be that relevant to them. Their ability to complete lots of different tasks in an orderly fashion is always going to be relevant to them. So
Sure.
Here's a couple questions that we got that came in. One, and this is such a big one. I hear this all the time, and I face this myself because we've moved to new states several times. Where can I find other families like us to hang out with? Where can I find, if my kids are not in school every day, that social component, that community component, especially if you're new to a community or you're new to open education, alternative schooling, where do you find people? I'm curious your answers to that, Matt. Maybe you could give me a bifurcated answer. Give me the like pre social media answer. What did people do? And then the answer today.
Right, because social media answer today is there's lots of Facebook groups, there's lots of, that want to be found, there's co-ops and Instagram accounts and thought leaders and YouTube channels. So there's a lot around social media, but not the only way, and that's not how it's always been done. What we've experienced is being out in the community during the day, right? If you go to a park, if you go to the zoo, you go to the museums, you're out in the community during the day, you start to run into families who are also doing things during the day. And it's fairly easy to ask, hey, I see you're here with school-age children at 1 o'clock at the zoo. Do you homeschool? Or do you do open education? Do you do alternative education models? And families get excited to be able to connect, on demand like that. So I'd say you might be shy, but don't be shy. People are wanting to find like-minded thinkers, and everyone is struggling to find that friendship or that connection with their child. I remember our second son struggled to have a connection with a friend, and someone moved in and they just connected. And it was an answer to our prayer to have one of our children find that one friend. And it made all the difference for the last couple of years of their, K-12 education.
Yeah. If they're out with kids during the school day, and then if they get out of a van and like 6 kids come out of it, those are, now you're like, okay, hold on. This is probably a homeschool. No, I love that you said that though, because even in the age of social media, where you can go and you can Google homeschool groups near me, you can go to Homeschool Legal Defense has a great database of, homeschool organizations. You can go on Facebook and start searching for homeschool groups in your town, your city. You can find a lot of stuff. Even there's so much more. Like it takes a couple of years in a new city in particular before you find all of these things you didn't know about. They're not always the most Google searchable. They're not always up to date. They don't always have websites. And that little hack that you gave, I have not even necessarily intentionally, this has happened so much. This is probably how my wife in particular, who's usually going out and making all these connections, has met so many of the people in groups, is just being out and about at parks and at places, seeing other people, and then making yourself just go talk to people. And even if you don't naturally want to, my wife has gotten really good. Just last night at Little League practice, she's like, I wanted to just sit there and read a book, but I was like, all right, I'm going to get up. I'm going to go talk to all the other moms that I see here. And one of them homeschooled, and she wouldn't have known that. And they live right nearby us, and they have kids, our kids' ages.
That's great.
And even though they're both on social media and they didn't find each other that way. So just being able to go up and chat and say hi to people. And when being out and about and being social. And that's also a great thing to model for your kids when they just see that you're willing to. I know this is a funny thing, but this current generation of kids, whatever you call them, Gen Z, or I've heard different things, they struggle more than I think any other previous generation in going up and talking to people face to face, because they're so used to having interactions mediated through screens. And so I've noticed, like, my wife and I really try to model that. And then we try to challenge our kids with that. Like, we'll go, I don't know if I got the wrong thing on my order. Go ask the waiter. Like, go ask the person, right? That doesn't seem, but that's like a scary thing to a lot of kids. And I think homeschooling often, back in the day, they'd say, I'm worried. Aren't you worried about socialization? But I've actually noticed the opposite, that homeschoolers are used to that kind of interaction and being, going out and saying, hey, do you also homeschool? And doing it with people of all different ages. And so there's a bonus, right? You meet people that way, but you also kind of learn and model confidence and being outgoing and social.
Yeah. And let me drill down on one of the things you said. Multi-age group relationships is something that is really strong in families who are doing alternative education model. They get an opportunity to have teenagers chatting with 10-year-olds and 10-year-olds chatting with teenagers, and mentoring young kids and just interacting with different age groups teaches something that traditional zip code and birth year cohorts don't. And so I think it's really powerful for that. And again, to your point, it doesn't have to be a learning setting. It could be the grocery store, right? Or the mall, or somewhere where you're during the day, see families together and around, and just engage with them and have fun with it.
We've also found that if you have kids that bicker and fight with each other a lot, sometimes this is a way to where they find these bonding experiences. So we'll go to a store sometimes. We'll say, okay, kids, you go and return this thing at the return desk. And one of my daughters would be like, I don't want to do that. I'm all nervous and shy. And one of them is like, yeah, I'll do that. And so I will assign it to the one who's shy, knowing that she will ask for help from her sister. And then they'll go do something together instead of fighting. So we've got a question here on subjects. Are there any subjects I absolutely shouldn't skip, even if my child isn't interested in them? Really curious to hear your take on that, Matt.
I'm probably fairly traditional in this sense, in that I call it the 3 R's plus entrepreneurship. So I do believe that there's a role for daily interaction with read something, write something, practice a little bit of math. As young children are growing, it doesn't have to be long, doesn't have to be killer. It's just, have some read, write, and arithmetic every day, a little bit of something, but then wrap around that with entrepreneurship, explore the world, see how you can engage with science and social studies and history and geography and all those other subjects in the context of the world you live in. And so that's what I would say. How about you?
I started off pretty much in the same place. And then at one point I got like much more radical. Yeah. I was reading about Sudbury Valley School and reading Free to Learn, and just like, hey, don't make them do anything. Just let them pick whatever. And while theoretically, I think there's actually some really strong cases there, and I don't think it's impossible for that to work, I found it too stressful to be that fully hands off. So like, I think I've come down to basically the same place. Okay. Reading, writing, and basic math. If for no other reason than that, so like math is an interesting one. If you have a kid that's totally uninterested in math and they're not going to really do anything with math, you could say, well, why make them? Just let them do whatever. There is a level of stress, even socially, for them in a world in which there are certain expectations around math at certain ages. Now, once you get into any of the advanced math, you can pretty much be fine. But if they're struggling to quickly calculate a percentage of tips if they're a waiter or something like that, because they just ignored it because they didn't care about it, like that's just kind of it's like a hardship that's not really necessary. So I'm okay being like, look, you're going to learn the basics on these 3 things. Trust me, it's going to make your life easier. It's going to make my life easier. When I'm working with you when you're a teenager on budgeting or something, if you don't know anything and we're starting from scratch, that's going to be a lot harder. So I have a basic agreement there. I think that the key with all of those actually is trying as best as possible to connect it to a relevant context for the kids. So find something that they enjoy reading, have them write things that they enjoy. And sometimes that's, writing things in the context of texting their friends, or a game that they're playing where they can chat with each other. It doesn't have to look like the standard curriculum approach to teach the ability to read and write.
A 5-paragraph essay is not what we're talking about as a required writing task. We've had kids that love to transcribe YouTube channel, interesting dialogue, and just see how it's, show them as 2 people talking and put them in, format like a screenplay. Those types of things can engage people who don't think they're writers to just write down stuff, or write a story about, just summarize your favorite athlete of what they did in their last basketball game. Just things like that, just to get the practice. It's not like you're becoming a writer. You're just practicing the exercise of writing something. And that is inherently valuable, that I think communication skills in general are needed throughout your whole life.
One thing that is kind of counterintuitive, I guess. So I used to approach it like, if I notice one of my kids struggles with a particular thing, then I would tend to be like, okay, I need to push that thing that they're not that good at more. Now I've almost taken the opposite approach, where if there's a kid that's just not that good at math naturally, and I can just tell, I'm like, okay, get them the basics, but don't worry too much. But if I notice one of my kids has a little bit of aptitude, instead of being like, oh, they'll be fine, right? The default is, oh, they already know that stuff. It comes easy to them. They'll be fine. I've actually tried to reverse that and say,
Double
if I
down.
know it's more aptitude, I got to pour fuel on that
Yeah.
and let them make that connections. Like my youngest is the only one of my 4 kids who is sort of quick with math. And I'll just notice in little ways. He'll be looking at the directions when we're driving and he'll quickly be like, you know, oh, it's going to be whatever. He'll do like little subtraction, little stuff. He'll mention things that I'm like, oh, he put that together. I didn't teach him that. And so I'm trying to not say, oh, good, I get to relax with him. He'll be fine with math. But to go the opposite direction, like
Double down, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And see where this goes. Because that's when it really gets fun. If you find something with your kids where they do stand out, that does come easy to them, let's disproportionately focus on that with him, you know?
No, that's great. And, many states have actually adopted computer science as replacement for math credit. And what I like about that is that learning to code using code.org or whatever Khan Academy type tools that are out there for free, helping your child, or Scratch is a great intro to programming, is a great math instruction. And so if you find your child that's struggling with traditional math curriculum, try some, to Andrea's point, just don't try harder, try different.
Yeah.
And try something like coding or Scratch or whatever and help them learn those principles, which are very mathematically based. And that's really great math.
Yeah. It's funny. I never really liked math that much. And I loved philosophy. And I took a community college. I had it was like a logic course, maybe symbolic logic, which was technically a philosophy course. But I get in there and it's like, oh, you're taking arguments and turning them into little symbols like A and B and C. And then you're doing these, it looks like a math equation. This looks like algebra. And I was like, wait a minute. And that's what coding is. It's a bunch of if-then statements. Yeah. And I was like, hey, I actually love this. Like, why didn't anybody tell me that this is another way to approach math?
Exactly.
Okay, so we have Helena. She sent a list of questions. She said, questions that keep me up at night, which is great framing, because I think as a parent, we all have those. I want to get into a couple of these. Am I teaching my kids well enough? Oh, how do I teach my kids to be resilient, responsible, confident, and good adults? And I love that question because I think that's really the question.
And that's the quest.
Yes. Yes. Not like, how do I make sure they know math? Those are all sub questions.
Right.
How do I raise them to be good people, to have good lives and to do good? I think that's just such a great question. So Matt, I'm going to let you answer how to raise your kids to be good adults.
Boy, yeah, if only any of us knew, right? As parents, that's our dream. And that's what I think is the eternal struggle, right? For parents to, even as we're parenting adult children now. Our youngest is 22, our oldest is 31. So
wait, so it doesn't stop? I'm not off the hook at some point?
It just changes, the relationship you have as parent-child continues. And we're now figuring out how to be the right parents to our adult children and grandparents to our grandchildren. And so that's, always the struggle. You want them to be healthy, happy, resilient, confident, interested in their life. So how to do that? I don't really know. So that's the short answer. But some of the things that I see people try and we've tried over the years is to what we've been talking about, double down on things they're interested in, add fuel to their fire when they show interest, support them in their interest pursuits, but also know when to back off. Sometimes I've found myself, a child was interested in this topic, so we're feeding the fire, feeding the flame. And then 3 weeks later, I'm still talking to them about it. And they're like, I'm done. I've moved on to another thing I'm interested in. And yet I'm still feeding that interest. And then it's kind of an awkward moment, right? And so, but by demonstrating you're willing to invest and support them in their interests, and then also respect when they've moved on, that creates some good conversation that is healthy. Even, that applies to competitive sports is a big example of that, right? That 8-year-old is the shining star of the team. And so you get them onto all the club teams and you're focused on a coach and a trainer. And then one day they wake up and they're not interested in that sport anymore, but you've invested so much that you think they're so talented that you just don't let them drop. And so that creates burnout, conflict, all these things as the child gets into their teenage years. We see so many great athletes at 10, 11, no longer playing that sport at 15, 16. Mm-hmm. And so I think that might apply to other skills and things, is know when to invest, know when to let it go.
One thought I'll throw in there on the sort of very broadest topic of raising kids to become good adults. This is probably the hardest thing. When I, as a parent or just as a person, when I do stupid stuff, when I'm not a good adult, actually going out of my way to acknowledge that and even share that and point that out, it's amazing how much trust that builds, especially when you have like young teenagers. They're always fighting with you and they always think you're wrong, and you're always trying to like, show them that you're right. And so you have this feeling like you can't let down your guard. And even small stuff like, if I'm gossiping about somebody and if I recognize it and stop and say, I shouldn't be talking about them like that. That's not a good thing to gossip. Sorry about that, guys. Something so small like that, it's amazing. You'll almost see it in their faces immediately. The level of respect they'll have for you, they'll open up to you. It's very, very hard to do, but just owning it when you've made mistakes and telling your kids about mistakes you made when you were younger as well. And kids love to hear those stories.
They do. And I'll get really personal here for a moment. So again, my wife, Amy, and I have run OpenEd for 16 years. And much of that time, our children were, teenagers or, young teens. And we tried to not bring the stress of running the business to them. And we thought we were doing them a favor by shielding them from the stress that Amy and I were having in running a business. And, really challenging the status quo of education was not a simple thing. So there's many nights that Amy and I were totally stressed out, but we tried to not have that impact our kids. We tried to show positive, modeling that. As they got older and we started sharing some of the war stories where we were extremely stressed out, they said, "Thank you for sharing that. I kind of wish you would have told us that then. We feel like all we were shown was just the positivity. We didn't realize you guys were stressed out after we went to bed, and thought then when we are stressed in our life, that's unusual because our parents are hiding that stress." Right. So again, getting very personal here and just saying kids need to see that there's both sides of that and be more open around the good and the bad, the excitement and the stress. Model that, let them see that that's okay to have both range of emotion. So anyway, there you go. You got it on the podcast today.
No, that's amazing. I thank you for sharing that. I know that, as kids, especially in those teen years, again, middle school and high school, when they're going through hard things, one of the feelings they often face is that they feel like they're alone. They're the only person who's had to go through this. And when they find out like, no, even my parents have gone through things, like they struggle too, they suffer too. It's huge. So I love that. So I'm going to combine these two questions into one. Am I letting my kids still be kids while helping them learn what they need to know? And then how do I encourage them to do hard things? So I'm combining them in, just let kids be kids, let them kind of just have fun. But at the same time, I need to make sure they're learning certain things. And then also try to make sure that they do hard things. I'm combining these because this relates to what you said about sports before. I've often faced these moments where my kid doesn't want to do something or they want to quit something. And I have to try to figure out, is this just because they don't want to do it because it's hard? They're just being lazy, or they're a little bit afraid and they just need to overcome that? Or is this because I'm pushing them to do something that's really, they don't need to be doing and they can just go and do what they actually want to do? And I'm curious if you have any sort of heuristics for yourself in trying to figure out what it is. When your kid's like, can I please quit karate? Can I please not do this math thing? It's like, okay, no, I gotta teach them to do hard things. I gotta make sure they get what they need. Or is it like, yeah, okay, that's cool. You can do that. The answer is sometimes it needs to be one and sometimes the other, but it can be really hard to figure out. And kids, as they get older, can get more savvy at kind of bluffing you a little bit and giving you reasons when the real reason is they just don't feel like doing it. How do you approach that?
No, I think that's probably one of the hardest questions to answer because of what we all just, what we had been talking about with feeding them with interest, supporting them, helping them, but then knowing when to say no, or let them say no, or let them quit, or let them go a different direction. I don't know how to, I don't have any tangible ways that we made those decisions. But I remember one time, if I had to get them up out of bed in the morning for a baseball practice, then we were done. Like that was to me, hey, if you can't set your alarm and get up and get to, upstairs, you're excited to have me drive you there, then I'm not going to drag you out of bed to get to baseball practice. So that was one of our thresholds was, are they showing upstairs without us? We're going to be supportive. I'm ready to drive you to practice, but you need to be in the car ready to go. And if not, then that might not be the right thing for you. So that was one of our thresholds was, would they get up and go? The other thing that I just wanted to add on this question is this analogy we sometimes use around weightlifting. So just give me a minute on this one. So, we want our children to do hard things. So that's more on that subset of that question of sometimes though, we then think that hard thing is they should go lift a 500-pound, weight. And when they don't do it, they can't do hard things, right? Because we're wanting them to lift a 500-pound weight. But in actuality, we need to just break that down into they need to first lift a 1-pound weight. And that's okay that they're just lifting a 1-pound weight. And that won't feel like they're doing hard things because it's not that hard to just lift a 1-pound weight. And so then you start just helping them lift a 10-pound weight next month, next week, next year, whatever, and help them just build some exercise and some strength rather than say, I need to do hard thing, go lift a 500-pound weight. It's too much. So break that off, break it down, and let them feel highly successful at building up their strength. And before long, they're going to be lifting a 100-pound weight, which is actually a really hard thing. Right. So anyway, that's an analogy we've used on helping people in entrepreneurship or in life. Don't discount yourself because you can't lift something too heavy. You're just not building up to that yet, but you can get there if you want.
I love what you said about if they weren't getting out of bed on their own to go to baseball, we were done. And it's so funny because when it comes to especially sort of sports and elective extracurricular type activities, it's really easy to get sucked into as a parent. Just all day long, you're just running your kids around to all these different things. It's super inconvenient. It's really stressful. You're gone all the time. Life is very chaotic. If it's something your kid doesn't even want to do, like you step back and you're like, wait a minute, I had to force them to go and it's really inconvenient for me. What is going on here? But it's so easy to just get stuck in that and not see. Like my son loves baseball. He's been playing it. It's just funny. There's always a couple kids on the team where you're like, the kid is begging to not be there.
Right.
And the parent looks so stressed and trying to get them there. And you're like, you don't have to do this to yourself. It's okay.
But
it's okay. I mean, it's a great heuristic.
It's culture. It's, what will parents think of me? All those things. Like, we had people criticize us when we let our child who didn't want to play it anymore not play. They're like, oh, you're letting them off the hook. You're not teaching them grit and, resilience and, stick-to-itiveness. And I'm like, that's not where we're going to make that battle. So we'll focus on those skills elsewhere, not on ones they're just absolutely miserable doing.
So I've had a couple on this question of, like, hey, is your kid just being lazy and you should make them push through? We've tried a couple different things. One is like almost like a timing thing. So if we have a kid that wants to quit a art class or whatever it is, sometimes trying to tease out, is this really not a good fit? Or are they just like nervous about this week's test? Or are they just trying, we'll say something like, all right, if you really don't like it, well, first, like, why? What don't you like about it? What do you think you'd want to do instead? How would you want to use that time? And then, okay, how about you finish the next, whatever, 2 months and then let's revisit. And if you do everything well during those 2 months and you have a good attitude about it, then we'll do something else or whatever. Sometimes you can, and then often we've done that before. And 1 month in, they've been like, I'm so glad I didn't quit. I love it now. They just got through a hard part. There was something they weren't telling us. They maybe had a fight with somebody, or they were, you know what I mean? There's something and so sometimes that can help you if you're unsure about their motives. If you know they just aren't into it, it's not the right thing, just quit. Don't stress about it.
Right.
But if you're unclear, sometimes just giving a little waiting period and being unthreatened as a parent, being like, okay, that's fine if you want to quit. Let's talk about it first, because I just want to make sure, I've had this myself where I thought I wanted to quit something and I ended up being glad I stuck around. How about we see it through until this date and then we take a look and reassess? That can work really well. And then another rule of thumb.
I like that. I like that a lot. That it's kind of a try different. It's not a try different category, but just give yourself a little bit of time, let it sink in a little bit, and then get to the root causes. Andrea also mentioned that of, get to the root cause of what's causing them to say no. If you kind of as a parent really think they would like that, if they would just give it a little shot, try to drill down to the root cause.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that becomes even more important. If it's something that they were just sort of neutral on and we just sign them up for and they don't end up liking it, I'm less worried about trying to figure out what's going on. Like, okay, they don't like it. If it's something they really wanted to do and they begged to do and they were all excited about, and then all of a sudden they don't want to, that's where I'll try to push a little further before I make that decision. And then I've learned over the years to almost do the anti-sale. If they're like, hey, I really want to take this class, I'll be like, nope, you're not going to like it, this, and this. And I almost try to test up front and then say, okay, if you want to do it, here's what it means for me and mom. It means twice a week, we're going to have to drive over here and do this and this. I'm willing to do all that, but I want to make sure you're in. And if you're in, I would like you to commit to do it for at least this long before you decide. And then that way you've kind of had this negotiation up front. And they put it in a different bucket so that it's not, because some kids will just like ask to do everything and then want to quit everything. And if you want to try to figure out, that can help to be upfront about it.
I think it's a great idea to demonstrate impact into the family culture, right? The family household has impact on people's choices, and it's okay to bring those up and to discuss them and support interests like that. So
yeah, but making trade-offs transparent. It's kind of where if you want to do this, here's what it means. You won't be able to do these things and these other impacts. That's okay. I just want to make sure you know. It's amazing how helpful that can be.
Agreed.
Okay, let's bring it home we have one. It's actually more of a story or a statement than a question. So I'm going to bring this in here. This is from Keely. She says, I would love to see you highlight some success stories for older kids. Noted, Keely. We'll try to sprinkle in some success stories here. I have a graduating homeschool senior this year who's knocking it out of the park and applying to college. Can't tell you how many parents have come out of the woodwork desperate to hear that you can keep homeschooling and rock it out at the high school level and beyond. We've heard nothing but good impressions of homeschoolers from admissions counselors we've spoken with from schools that he's interested in. So I love that. Like just sharing, not just questions. I'm going to see, and Charlie, if you can take notes of this, if we can pull in like 1 or 2 stories each episode just to share about, here's a kid that opened up their education and here's something that worked well, just to have that inspiration. And Matt and I don't have to just continually refer to our own limited set of experience, but pull in stories from others. So if you have a question or a success story, something that you're really excited about, something that was really amazing to see with one of your kids, shoot us an email. You can just email market@opened.co. We will bring those in and we'll try to get them on one of these episodes. Matt, do you have any final closing thoughts?
I will just say on that note that having done this for 16 years, I do have more stories than just my own children, right?
Right, that's true. I know.
Thousands and tens of thousands of families, and they've shared stories with me over the years that just are jaw-dropping, awe-inspiring, everything you can think of. Like there's so many, from kid earning a pilot's license and, getting a job with Delta at age 18, or, getting coding boot camps and getting a job offer from a tech company to be a junior web developer, or someone starting a cosmetology license and business, or, professional ski racers, or entrepreneurships making $100,000 in their first summer of selling their product. Like they're literally unlimited, to 4-year scholarships, to getting their bachelor's degree before they turned 18, to like literally everything under the sun. On our website is a video of a student who was an actor in Hollywood and would do schooling on the set, as he called it. Those stories are just so many that sometimes we don't take the time to highlight them. So I think we should incorporate some highlight stories in all of these episodes.
Yeah. I'm excited about that. Actually, we just got an email this week from a OpenEd student who went on to do stop motion animation on a bunch of film projects.
Yeah.
And if I remember the story, it was like parent was a little nervous about letting them kind of pull away from the traditional path and go pursue their, love of stop motion animation. Yeah, they flood in. So that'd be a great thing. We'll try to put together a couple for each episode that we can share little highlights of all the different ways you can succeed. And that's the whole point. You open up your education, see every option on the table for whatever your kid needs. And success has no one definition. There's infinite ways. As many people as there's ways to succeed and have a good life.
Agreed.
Love it, Matt. Thanks so much. We'll catch you next time.
See you, man.